Good evening. Welcome to the November 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And because one or more planning board members are participating remotely, every vote will be taken by roll call. Please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. I'll proceed to call the roll of the planning board members. Justin Wood.
Aye. Here.
Bob Hassinger.
Here.
Linda Hassinger.
Here.
Prabhu Venkatraman has notified us that he will be a few minutes late joining us, so he is not at present right at the moment. David Robbins' chair is here, and Maura McCormick, our associate member.
Here.
Very good. Staff with us is, of course, Town Planner Christopher McGoldrick.
Present.
We will have additional participants as necessary as the meeting proceeds. Our first agenda item is public input. If anybody from the public is attending the meeting and wishes to comment on a matter that is not currently on the agenda, not already on the agenda, now would be the time. I see nobody in the audience here in the meeting room. I don't see any hands raised on Zoom. So I will take that as an indication that there is no public input this evening. We'll proceed then to the action item agenda. Our first action item is a draft decision on the special permit site plan approval for various locations with the New England Power Company. As I recall, we discussed this draft decision at our previous meeting, noted that there were some missing pieces, and I believe the draft decision has been updated to respond to all of the issues noted at the previous meeting.
That is correct. For my knowledge. I can pull it up.
I move we approve the draft decision.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the draft decision. That motion implicitly encompasses all the usual items that we go through, the findings, the waivers, and everything else. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman is still absent. Mr. Robbins votes aye. Declared the motion carried by unanimous vote of those currently present and voting. Also note that it is the required supermajority of 4 in favor. So, moving on, we have one more draft decision to deal with. Modification of special permit at 86 Main Street. This is for the addition of a generator at the existing cell site at the Congregational Church in South Grafton. Again, this was a draft decision that we discussed at the previous meeting, noting that that the waiver section had yet to be filled in, and that there was also a notation, a finding was added to note the applicant's plan to use a privacy fence rather than the chain link fence as proposed on the plans.
I move we approve the draft decision.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board approve the draft decision with all the usual regarding the findings and the waivers and everything else. With any discussion on the motion, any additions or changes to the draft decision? Hearing none, we'll put this one to a vote. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Mr. Venkatraman is absent, but the full vote of 4 in favor and none against of those here is a required supermajority vote in favor of the decision. Our third and final action item is the approval of the 2022 Planning Board meeting calendar. As far as I can tell, the calendar follows the usual schedule of second and fourth Mondays, except when it conflicts with a town meeting or a holiday.
Correct. I can pull up those dates.
There seem to be a few less conflicts, or I think we usually have at least one more conflict that moves our meeting than what there is this time, which is good.
I do have a suggestion that the board may want to consider is for November and December to move all 3 of those dates 1 week prior and add December 19th to have 2 in December. It would mean a 1 week gap between October and the first meeting in November, but otherwise it keeps typical 2 week.
It kind of causes me a little bit of a difficulty because I have an accommodation. I have a Monday night meeting that they've given an accommodation to hold it on
The alternate.
the Monday that we don't meet, and you're moving to conflict with it. I'd rather leave it the way it is and call a meeting if a meeting is needed. It's very rare if there's a meeting needed after December 12th. We can set a meeting any time that fits the situation.
That's fair. It was a suggestion. I didn't have a strong preference.
Yeah, I think by and large we have tried very hard to hold to our second and fourth Monday schedule. I think it is worth noting that between December 12th and the second Monday in January is a good month or so. And I think Bob's suggestion is really on point there. If we do need to hold additional meetings between December 12th and that first meeting in January, we can schedule a special meeting, say the 19th of December, if we do a Monday meeting, or such other time as may be dictated by circumstances.
It isn't uncommon that we don't have 2 meetings in December.
Actually, it's quite common that we don't have 2 meetings. I can remember us having a meeting, I think in the week between Christmas and New Year's, quite a while back. But the main thing that would push, unless somebody has a real critical, they need to get something approved before the end of the year. About the only thing that comes up is an A&R. There aren't a whole lot of days to act on it. So that could, although I don't remember any time recently that it has come up as an issue at the meeting.
And just looking
That
at
one requires 3 of us.
I'm looking at my calendar here for 2022, just looking at December. Let's see, December 2022. Oh, yeah. My calendar display was misleading me on the month.
That's a Macintosh with its calendar.
Yeah.
I wish that they would show something where the month ends and the next month begins.
Yeah, if you look at it carefully and really know how to read it, it's not all that ambiguous. But at a glance, it can be a little bit off. Yeah, the 1, 2, 3. Yes, it is 4 weeks between the 12th of December and the 9th of January of 23. But yes, I think all things considered, if the schedule looks good, and as with really any time of the year, if a need arises, we often have 3 weeks between meetings, and occasionally the need arises to do something in less than the 3 weeks. So sufficient to say we can schedule additional meetings to to meet unusual or unanticipated needs.
If we approve the schedule as drafted.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board approve the schedule as drafted. I will note for the record that Mr. Venkatraman appears to have joined us in the meeting.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Not only can we see you and hear you, but you can hear us. That sounds pretty good to me. All righty, so we have a motion
You
on
got
the
a new
floor.
camera, Prabhu?
Yeah, my camera was not the issue. This is the one that's the issue.
Yeah, the picture looks good here. Okay, go ahead.
All righty. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We now have a schedule for next year. Mr. McGoldrick.
So I just wanted to note, the board is probably familiar with the format where they put the days for the submission of materials. Having this, we will backfill those dates,
Yes.
and we'll provide those to the board for their review as well. But thank you for providing us the
Yes,
approval of those dates.
That was my assumption, that
Yeah.
with this schedule approved, you could then fill out the various deadline schedules.
Correct.
Excellent. So that completes our action items. We now have, under discussion items, a complete streets policy. Was there anything on that?
Yeah, so I actually have an update. The state moved very quickly in scoring our policy. I'm happy to report that we received a score of 97 out of 100. The policy itself was scored at 93, and we got 4 points for being a community compact member. So with that, we'll start to proceed with the Tier 2 project, which is development of our prioritization plan. So I'll start with that application. That's a reimbursement program where the town will commit some funds to development of the prioritization plan, but it is also reimbursed similar to Chapter 90, and so the actual project does not come to any cost of the community. So that process will start.
Did I hear you say that we got 97 out of 100?
97 out of 100, and there were no comments to really say why we were knocked the additional points, but
Yeah, we should have
My-
gotten 100 out of 100, right?
My
Does that
understanding
4 points allow potential 104?
it may have, yeah. I'm not sure how that works. My understanding is it's rare, if not impossible, to reach 100 on their scoring. There's always room to improve, and I think that's the overall metric that's considered there. But certainly a very high score in terms of the policy. So again, congratulations and thank you and the select board for their input on that as well.
All right. Now we'll see about putting it into action in some manner.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Anything else on Complete Streets?
That's it.
Next discussion item is master plan.
Yep, so I don't have an update per se on the master plan. I'll continue to work on a draft RFP and hopefully have that for the board's next meeting. I did briefly want to touch on a potential element of that, which is the local rapid recovery plan, and that those identified items in that plan, the action items for the implementation of the local rapid recovery plan. I don't know if the board has had a chance to review those, but just we are looking for applying for the funding assistance with those local rapid recovery plans. There is that process that the state is looking at funding to help for implementation. We can choose up to 2 of the 12 identified priority projects. And so I will be looking for input. The deadline for that application is in early December, so I will need response to that soon. If there are 2 priority actions that the board is really amenable to pursuing, we can start with that. Certainly we will pursue all 12 as time and resources dictate and capacity to implement those programs dictate. But certainly getting started with two of them and having the support from be it CMRPC or whatever other consultant gets appointed would be helpful in moving that along. So.
On the topic of the master plan, I was just reviewing some information I dug up a while back. And this is just sort of for amusement maybe, or information not for any action right now, but the implementation plan in the 2020 master, or the 2000 master plan, the implementation plan had no less than 239 recommendations.
Did I mention that?
Yep.
I counted them. I've been trying to put together some data on that, and with the expectation of kind of going through that and noting which ones might have actually been accomplished or some action taken on them, which ones are no longer relevant. And that's really, that's not of immediate concern, but ultimately when we get toward the production of a new implementation plan as part of the master plan, that's kind of down the road toward the end of the process. But we will, I'm sure we will be looking at the old implementation plan, drawing from that anything that still seems relevant or appropriate.
Yep.
But I just thought, I counted them up, and I thought my open space plan with 65 action items was a bit excessive.
Yeah, I think we want to think carefully about the implementation plan and maybe take a little different
Yes, and I
approach to it this time so that at least someone could get all the way through it before giving up. Falling asleep, I hear. Yeah, so.
Yeah, my experience with trying to follow up on the open space and recreation plan, action plan, is going to definitely inform my thoughts on what to do in the master plan.
Yep.
But that's down. The details are all down the road on that.
Yeah.
That
We did benefit on one eventually, the Peralt land, where
Yes.
the new library
Yes.
is. That took a long time, actually, 20 years, give or take. But it was pointed out by our consultant and put in, and that's one that you can count when you're counting up, Dave.
Yes. I seem to recall that Ann Morgan, this is a good many years ago, Ann put together something, and I don't think I have a copy of it, but she had attempted to go through this and check off the ones that were done.
Yeah, and she did find some.
Yes.
There were some we counted even then, and now we have at least one more.
Yes, we can. I'm sure we can check off a few more.
the in terms of the implementation plan, in the previous meeting, the board had made that comment, and Chairman Robbins' comment also jogged my memory. So thank you for that discussion. In updating a separate plan, the hazard mitigation plan update, working with the consultant on that, we went through. They provided us with a draft implementation format that I found to be much more efficient in outlining responsible parties and timelines, and it actually creates for each implementation step kind of a one-page snapshot identifying a community champion, things like that. So I'm not going to try to go into much detail without some graphics or
Yes,
instances,
you're
but,
right. Yeah,
but down the line that'll
that
be
had momentarily slipped my mind. You're right. When we saw that, when I saw that, like you, I thought, I like that general format.
Yep.
So we will, we will keep that in mind as we, at whatever point we begin to look at constructing our new implementation plan.
Right.
Yep. and Chris, I was speaking with someone from the public today briefly about master plan being on our agenda, and they just had a slight concern. I want to see if you were willing to talk to it. Is, you know, the delay between when it's passed a town meeting in the spring to having an RFP out. You know, what was the delay in generally speaking, and because it's funded over a 3-year period, will this delay for even the RFP affect our funding timelines?
So I don't believe it'll affect the funding timelines. If it does, we'll address that in our town meeting votes to appropriate the funds. So that may have to get adjusted, but I'm not anticipating that at this time. In terms of the allocation from town meeting to us starting the RFP process now, simply staff capacity to take on this project is probably the largest delay in getting this off the ground. I wanted to make sure that we were in a position to adequately give the process the attention and resources that it needed. So so we will be starting now, and I think things will move quickly from here through the rest of the 3 phases. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess, and this is sort of speculation, that when the RFP goes out, it will be not more than a few weeks before we get the responses and we can make a vendor selection.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, you know, that probably puts the start of the actual work into maybe the February, March timeframe, something like that.
Right.
We're just speculating here, but
Yeah.
you know, and this is, you know, this is basically the first phase of it, which is data collection, if I remember.
Yeah, so the
And
way
we haven't kind of defined that, but that
Yeah,
will be
so-
defined in the RFP.
Yeah, so largely what I see is this is going to be pulling data from the census updates, which also were delayed, pulling the data from that, other kind of sources of data that the consultant can identify, and you know the board can identify that they'd like to pull from. And what that will do is that will frame from that data the second phase when we go to public input and development of stakeholder interviews. We'll have the data and we can have a conversation backed by data to say, is this reflective of, what is this data telling us in terms of the community context? So that'll inform our discussion and help us to have more robust engagement with the community based in actual factual data. So
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not, at this point, I'm not the least bit concerned about the delay between the town meeting action, which actually that funding, although a town meeting passed it in May, it's effective July 1st.
Yep.
And then, and I think, you probably hit on, Chris, is the same assumption and concern I have is staff resources are finite, and staff has a lot of work to do besides just planning board support.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned either. I didn't want to speak out of turn, so to speak. I wanted to have the right answer, which is what I thought it was. But
yep, it's a fair question.
Yeah. So anything else on master plan? We will be getting much more into it over the next few months.
Yep.
I think on my own part, I haven't been pushing forward on master plan yet, to the extent that I'm in a position to do so, because we're trying to wrap up the subdivision rules, one big project at a time.
Yep.
But I think we got that one nearly wrapped up. So, anything else? Moving on then, general business, we have no bills. We have no minutes of previous meetings. We have about 5 minutes before our 7:30 public hearing start time. Is that time enough for your staff report, or do you want to put that off?
Yeah, I think I have a fairly brief staff report this week. So we did receive updated application materials for 244 Worcester Street. I know that they'll be coming back, I believe, next meeting,
Yes.
the 1st in December. So if the board can review those are up on the website. Obviously, they've been sent to Graves for peer review, which we haven't received back yet, but I anticipate
And
that'll
also-
come back.
And also MDM is to gonna be conducting the traffic.
Correct, yeah. So, so that, I believe the applicant has a fairly quick timeline after that, so they're gonna be eager to push forward, so, just be aware that those materials are up. Other than that, this week, the staff did work on a number of issues through town at a number of development sites, one of which was 109 Creeper Hill Road. My understanding is those issues are being addressed. There's a number of odor control systems that have been put in place and are being, frankly, calibrated to control the issue. So, although there was the issue and the board should be aware of that, I believe it has been addressed at this point and will continue to be addressed.
This is that smell issue, just to
Correct. Yeah.
just to say it.
And then the flooding at 119 Main Street similarly was obviously an issue that came up. This is a 40B, so under the purview of the Zoning Board of Appeals, but staff moved to support the project from a staff perspective. Our understanding is that there have been a number of improvements that were done over that weekend to address the ongoing flooding. And we're going to continue to monitor the site and work with the developer to make more robust adjustments so that it doesn't happen again. So
I've seen a lot of complaints about the blasting at that same project, right?
Yep.
I wonder if there's anything they can do to at least that maybe improve the when you're gonna blast, you sound the horn and that sort of thing. But apparently, a lot of people aren't getting that, so maybe they can do something to improve it. Maybe they can also do more about putting out
Yeah,
when-
fire is
when
basically
it's going to happen.
regulating the blasting,
correct, yeah.
so.
But certainly any of those comments. So I haven't seen directly the comments related to blasting, and you're right, that likely would have been sent to fire. But if if you want to copy me on any of those comments, I'm happy to see what we can do to support that those issues.
Now, typically, every time there's a blast, some of the group just fill up with, "There was this big bang just now. What's going on?
Yes.
Why don't they tell us?"
And then the other update I had, well, it's somewhat lack of an update, if you will, is on the Brossi appeal. So we are awaiting that. The trial has concluded. We are awaiting a decision of the judge and have not yet received that. So I'll continue to keep you updated as soon as that becomes available.
All right. Moving on, our last item of general business is correspondence. Did anybody see anything in correspondence that caught their eye?
Nope.
And we're still a minute and a half shy of 7:30. Reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC. I have one. Very briefly, the Open Space and Recreation Committee held a meeting last week at which the committee went through that list of 65 action items and proposed one town board or committee or entity to be the lead on that. So we've got a list of 65 action items with all the lead agencies identified. We will be circulating that to each of the 17 committees that were identified. Actually, we added one. And we'll be circulating that to those boards, committees, etc., for their review and comment. This is sort of the committee's first guess, and so the planning board will be, prior to the next planning board meeting, the planning board will receive the list of all the open space and recreation plan action items that we believe the planning board is the lead on, and also and additionally the ones that the planning board plays a supporting role. So we, in the planning board, as well as conservation, recreation, and all 18 committees will receive that information for their concurrence or feedback. The thing still, it's flexible enough that we will be able to move things around, maybe place things more appropriately if that seems to be necessary. So that's my report. Any other planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
Do you expect, on what you just reported, Ron, do you expect some process of buy-in? In other words, you can say they're supposed to do this, but besides you having said that, what weight is there? The
Well,
same thing came up with a plan, with a master plan.
Yeah, ideally, everything that we say that we think the planning board should be lead on, the planning board will say, yeah, that makes sense. Alternatively, the planning board can say, well, we actually think there's another board that is better positioned to be the lead on that. And so we'll take that kind of feedback and ultimately, as best as we can, get buy-in from everybody that, yeah, this all makes sense. Occasionally the question comes up, well, can we guarantee that all these things will be done? And the answer is really no. There's no enforcement mechanism for, whether you're talking master plan, open space plan, housing production plan, any other plan. There's no real enforcement mechanism to guarantee that any of this stuff happens.
Actually, there's a question on the master plan about optionally asking town meeting to approve it. We didn't do that for a bunch of reasons this last time. But that's a piece that can be in the mix. And that may give it some more weight as to the various groups, because you just say, well, we're gonna build a new highway or something, and well, that's nice, sure, it's a good idea and we really need it, but where's it gonna come from?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot. There'll be something to talk about.
Yes. Alrighty, moving on then. It is now 7:32, so we can begin our public hearings. The first public hearing we have on our schedule is the subdivision control rules and regulations revisions. This is the required public hearing that must be held before the board adopts new or revised subdivision rules.
No new
I
hearing.
imagine we have a legal notice that should be read.
Do we?
Well, there's bound to have been a legal notice.
Okay, I didn't pick up that there was a legal notice, a new one. All right, can you pull it up?
Yep,
I
I'll
don't
pull it up
know.
in a second.
Sorry. I looked at it and didn't think that was a new.
It's a hearing.
That's all right. I can grab it.
Yes, we have not
Go
held
ahead.
a subdivision rules and regulations public hearing since
Oh,
2009.
Okay, I didn't realize that we read a legal notice for that. I was looking for something else.
Yeah, I think it's been our practice at least to read the legal notices for our other public hearings, and I don't know whether that's actually a legal requirement, but we always do it. So we might as well do it for this one.
I've never seen anything that said it was a requirement.
Yeah, can you open it?
Where is it?
I'm pulling it up.
If you want, Linda, I do have it up. I can read it myself.
Okay, go ahead and read
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Pursuant
That
to
works.
MGL Chapter 41, Section 81Q of the Planning Board of the Town of Grafton will hold a public hearing on Monday, November 22nd, 2021, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider amending subdivision control rules and regulations by making revisions to Sections 2, 3, 4, and 5, and corrections throughout the document, such as punctuation, spelling, and formatting. A copy of the text is available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at long URL with the Planning Board office during regular business hours. This will be a hybrid meeting conducted in person and by remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov www.planning-board for more information.
All right, Chris, if you could enable me for screen sharing.
Because I don't have an iPad, that's what I would normally read it from.
Now,
Okay.
there it is. So I have a very brief presentation just to review what this is all about for the benefit of anybody in the public who is interested and hasn't really, may not be familiar with it. So, just by way of a quick introduction to what we're doing here, the subdivision rules and regulations are, the planning board is required to adopt these rules and regulations by the subdivision control law, which covers the quoting from the law, laying out and construction of ways and ensuring sanitary conditions in new subdivisions. And basically the subject matter covered by these rules is procedures for review and approval of applications and design and construction requirements for roadways and utilities. As I sort of alluded to a moment ago, this was last updated April 27th, 2009. So what we've done here in this revision, there's a lot of little changes here. A lot of them are just editorial type changes. Spelling, punctuation, formatting, updating terminology and making the terminology consistent throughout the document. We replaced some very old hand-drawn diagrams with CAD-drawn diagrams. On a somewhat more substantive nature, we've made various changes for consistency with current law, regulations, and practices around administrative procedures, making it consistent with the latest version of the zoning bylaw, consistency with stormwater laws and regulations, which had changed considerably since the subdivision rules were last updated, Mass DOT regulations and practices, also bringing it up to date with that. We coordinated with the fire department to make sure that our rules are consistent with their requirements, with our engineering people for consistency with current engineering standards and practices. So these are a little bit substantive in nature, but no real major changes because in a lot of cases we were following current practices anyway. This brings the language of the subdivision rules up to date with respect to, for the most part, what we already do. Some of the more notable changes, more interesting changes maybe, not too many actually. One, this is per the fire department, we increased the minimum roadway width from 22 feet to 24 feet so that their fire apparatus can more easily be assured of making it through. A couple of things we did with regard to dead-end streets, which have, there's been some occasional issues with how people understand and interpret that. So the new regulations clarify and make more explicit what is considered a dead-end street and how we measure the maximum lengths, as we have we have that 500-foot maximum length on dead-end street, and I think we've tried to clarify how that's measured and what constitutes a dead-end street. We did add a rule to ensure adequate frontage for lots on a turnaround, because one of the requirements we have is where practical, a turnaround on a dead end should, provision can be made to extend that to adjacent land. And because our zoning bylaw allows for reduced frontage on a turnaround, the issue comes up is when you eliminate that turnaround, can you make sure that the lots on the turnaround will still have the increased frontage that's compliant with the zoning bylaw? So we've got a rule, we added a rule for that. We added a little bit of flexibility for curb requirements. So we had certain cases where we said it had to be vertical granite curbs, and other cases where it had to be Cape Cod berm. And we've amended the regulations to allow more flexibility in cases where that's appropriate. And then the last one I'll mention is intersection separation, for which we need to refer to a little diagram. The current regulations require a 600-foot separation between intersections everywhere. And we've revised that to be more in line with how a lot of other towns deal with intersection separation, where we distinguish between the same side separation and opposite side offset. The same side separation we're now saying should be 250 feet minimum or twice the minimum lot frontage, whichever is greater. And that basically assures that, you know, you don't create lots that are relatively narrow with streets on three sides. The opposite side offset, on the other hand, the major concern there is traffic entering the main road from the two side roads. And there's a potential for, if the streets are too close together, but they're not immediately opposite one another, there's a potential issue of traffic conflicts. So again, in line with what most other communities do, we say that you know, we want to see at least 150 feet between streets entering from the opposite side. And then the third rule here is on a major street. That's a street that gets a lot of traffic. You know, we're looking at a minimum of 500 feet separation, which is only a slight reduction from the current 600 feet. But the point of that is that on a street with a lot of traffic, you don't want to have a whole lot of turning movements, you know, too close together. So that's basically, these are the, the major items that we've changed in the rules and regulations. But there are a number of additional things that are likely to come up in the future. Not for this update. You know, we're trying to wrap this one up, but there are various recommendations that we expect to influence subsequent changes to the subdivision rules. The complete streets, Chris mentioned earlier that we've got a complete streets policy in place now. As we look at it, the implementation of that, we may find that suggests some further changes to the subdivision rules. VHB is undertaking the fourth year of the MS4 review, and they're specifically going to be looking at low impact development regulations. I rather expect that some of that's going to impact on the subdivision rules. Also, we've talked earlier this evening about the master plan update. Whenever that finally gets completed, the recommendations of the new master plan are probably going to include recommendations for changes to the subdivision rules. So that's coming up in the future. And finally, the open space and recreation plan included some action items recommending changes to subdivision rules. Some of those have already been incorporated into this revision. Others are likely to be looked at further for some future subdivision rules update, which probably will take place in something less than 10 years from now. So that is, for anybody in the audience is curious, that's what we've been doing with the subdivision rules. And as this is a public hearing, it's now open for comment from the public or from the members of the board, if the board has any further comments. And I don't see anybody in the audience here. I see a hand raised from Zoom. Mr. Hill has his hand raised.
No, I have nothing to offer here, sorry.
Okay.
So I will note, VHB did provide some comments late on Friday. I did not have a chance today to upload them, so I apologize for not getting them to you, but I will have them uploaded shortly for the board's consideration. They were very minor in nature for the most part, and as mentioned, they'll be looking at more extensive edits under the MS4 permit review. So
Okay. So we will take that as a submission, as a public comment to the public hearing. And with that, is there anything else anybody has for this public hearing? If not, then perhaps the board would want to close the public hearing.
I move that we close the hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we close this hearing. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Justin?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Linda?
Hi.
Prabhu?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The hearing is closed. The next step on this would be for the board to vote to adopt the new regulations. The board may wish to not take that vote until they've had a chance to see to review all the public comments and incorporate them as necessary into a revised document. So on that assumption, I will say that we can plan on incorporating the VHB comments into yet one more revision of the document. And at our next meeting, we can consider voting to adopt the new regulations. And once that's done, the new regulations go to the town clerk, and from there to the registry of deeds. And then we'll be done. Little did I know, when I set out to start this in, I think, January of last year, little did I know how long it would take. But I think it's been worth the effort.
Thoroughness tends to take time.
Yes, and some of these, the revisions we are anticipating from Complete Streets and Low Impact and others are likely to be relatively small, but in comparison to what all we've done with this one. So we're good.
Dave did a very good job.
Yeah. Why don't you say that loud enough for everybody to hear, Linda?
Thank you, David. You did a very, very good job.
Yes.
A lot of work.
Well, thank you. Yes, so moving on, we have a request, a public hearing, a continuation of the public hearing for the preliminary plan approval at 340 and 348 Providence Road.
Good evening, this is Norman Hill. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, I'd like to speak on behalf of Robert Canty. At the last public hearing, it was pointed out that we had designed the cul-de-sac with a diameter of 120 feet and that it shouldn't have been more than 100 feet. So we have revised these plans to bring them in full compliance with the zoning bylaws and the subdivision regulations. And so the diameter of the cul-de-sac now is just 100 feet. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, as I believe, yes, we did have a Graves review of this, and I don't recall off the top of my head whether the Graves review resulted in any significant changes to the plan, but I will assume that the revised plan that's before us now includes any revisions pursuant to the Graves review.
Yes, it does. For example, on lot 5, there's a neighbor's driveway that exists, cuts the corner off of lot 5. So we provided an easement for that. And then also he was asked a question about site distance. So we provided an easement along the road, along the existing road, to provide for future site distance. So we took care of those things as well.
Very good. You have anything on that, Chris?
Nope. So the only thing to note, although we received a digital copy of these plans, as you see uploaded, if I could just get a hard copy, I know that we haven't received those yet in the office. So those could-
Oh, we dropped off 2 sets. We'll bring over 2 more.
just the revised. There was the 2 revised sheets that we haven't received the hard
All right.
copies of yet. Other than that, as noted, all the Graves comments were either addressed or could be addressed during the definitive plan phase. So,
Any questions or comments from the board?
Do we need any acknowledgement of the changes from Graves before we close the hearing?
the plans that are uploaded address those changes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know sometimes Graves sends back a response that says, okay, acknowledge the change, that kind of thing.
Right.
I didn't know if we needed that.
Yeah, just closing the loop with Graves. Graves agrees that everything's been addressed. Is that what you're asking?
Basically, yes.
Yes, I mean, we don't have the final sign off, but even before these revisions, their comment was either that it was all acknowledged or that it could be handled at the definitive phase. So,
Okay.
Okay, so we've crossed every I and dotted every T that needs to be
for the preliminary plan,
for
correct?
the preliminary, yes. So is there any Any comment from any member of the public on this? This is, after all, a public hearing. Seeing none, I don't see any hands raised in the room or on Zoom. So perhaps a motion to close the public hearing would be in order.
Move that we close the public hearing and that we approve the decision.
What decision?
Direct staff to
Right.
draft a
Right.
decision, maybe.
Okay,
Picky, I know.
Second.
all right, draft.
All right, moved and seconded that we close the public hearing and direct staff to draft a decision. And hopefully the decision will be available for us to review at our next meeting. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye,
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. This hearing is closed. Thank you, Norm. Through you,
Thank
Norm,
you,
thank
everyone.
the
Stay well and
applicant.
have a nice Thanksgiving. Thank you.
You too.
Alrighty. And we do have one more public hearing on our schedule for which the applicant has provided us with a written request to continue it to our December 13th meeting.
I move that we grant the applicant's request.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded that we grant the applicant's request to continue this hearing to December 13th. Any discussion on the motion?
Did the applicant give us a reason they're requesting the continuance?
Yes, so I did reach out to them, given the board's comments at the last continuance request. They are working on, or my understanding is they are working on finalizing some discussion with the owner of the driveway that is at the entrance of the building, that they wanted to actually meet on site with that abutter. And that has been scheduled for after Thanksgiving. So I anticipate that we will likely have a better update at our next meeting.
All right. And are we still plenty of padding on our shot clock, so to speak, with the?
I can look. I believe there is, and also the continuance request should cover that as well. But I believe we're still well within the decision deadline. Just pull up.
Yes, part of the written request is the applicant acknowledging that they understand that this request will stay any and all applicable time periods for review.
I forgot we added that to our boilerplate.
Yes, I don't think there are any deadlines that cannot be extended per agreement with the applicant.
Right.
All right.
Oh, let's see, I guess we have a motion on the floor, don't we? So I can call for a vote. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye,
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. This hearing is continued to December 13th. And we have made it entirely through the agenda. Are there any other items which may lawfully come before the board?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye,
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. This meeting is adjourned.